Well, welcome everybody to the Environmental Awareness Show. I'm Dean Val with Dean Kevin and Ryan. We're going to talk about primary water today. And let's see if I can bring up here Deborah Tavares, who's a Northern California investigator that has done a lot with researching primary water. This is her, she's on the Project Camelot here, being interviewed with Cassidy, what's her name, Cassidy, but she's talking about primary water. I just wanted to give you some information on that because it's important for what we're going through now with the drought in some parts of the world.
And I will tell you, what you are going to hear me discuss today is going to be difficult to absorb. Have an open mind and clear away all of the propaganda that you're relentlessly being pounded with by your radio, media. All aspects of your local water agencies are telling you to conserve on water because the reservoirs are running dry. They're showing you pictures of water that has been evaporated and or released from the reservoirs, and we're being pummeled with the illusion that we're running out of water, and we're not. Water is a renewable. So again, I ask you to all sit there with an open mind and be available to this information because your lives will depend on it. And when I first heard about this, I was having a very difficult time understanding Paul Power, who is known as the Hungarian water wizard. I met Paul a number of years ago, and he started to describe water to me. And really at the time, I had no thought about water. I just thought, okay, rain and snow melt, and had no real deep consideration about it. And then I was listening and listening and listening. I had come across in other documents, however, prior to talking to Paul, about how the goals of the controllers were to privatize the world's water supply. And as I dug and listened, and actually my husband and I went on a number of primary water drills. Now you have to drill for primary water. I proved to myself, which I needed to do, so that I could then have this conversation with all of you. I'm very, very dubious about information, particularly something as massive as what you're going to be hearing discussed today, because this is huge. This is a global takedown now, an attempt to take over the world's water supply and privatize it and meter it so that you can be turned off if you overuse. And I want to bring back what happened, what we did and NATO did to Libya back in 2011. And I know that many people are unaware of this. And so picking it back up, I was getting ready to discuss with all of you what NATO and the United States did to Libya back in 2011. And this is extremely significant because, as you might recall, Muammar Gaddafi was getting ready to back the dinar by gold. Not only that, Muammar Gaddafi had constructed the largest irrigation system in world's history by tapping into primary water. And he supplied over 6.5 million cubic meters of fresh water per day to the various cities in Libya, enabling his country to grow fruits, vegetables, and grains in an area otherwise impossible to cultivate in the desert in the past. The project cost the country $25 billion and was completed without financial support from any major countries or loans from the IMF banks. And in 2011, this incredible achievement was destroyed by NATO and the U.S. with depleted uranium nuclear bombs, cutting off the water supply to over 6 million people and sending these people into a humanitarian crisis. Not many of you knew about the Great Man-Made River Project and now you do. The intention was to eliminate the use of primary water. I'm going to cover much and not necessarily in a particular order, but I want all of you to know that our mental acuity has been greatly reduced by the method in which we have been receiving water in our municipal water supplies. In other words, when you turn on your faucet and you're hooked up to a municipal water supply, that water is extremely, extremely toxic, and it lowers our IQs. In fact, there's an interesting phenomenon. It's called the Hungarian phenomenon. And in Hungary, at the base of the mountains, where the Khazarians and Hungarians have lived, they had been drinking primary water, really unbeknownst to them. It was just the water that was available there that was surfacing up from down below the mantle. And they are noted as some of the most highly regarded scientists in the world. So I want to describe and explain what is primary water, because we're not running out. In fact, we're considered to be the water planet, and water is a renewable. So why are we being told that we have a water shortage? It's for absolute control of the food supply, the lands, and all of the water, and to reduce the populations. So primary water is created deep within in the mantle of the earth from the synthesis of hydrogen and oxygen. And under tremendous pressure from the earth's internal heat, H2O, in the form of vapor, is forced upward through the rock fissures, the weakest areas of the earth's crust. Now, keeping in mind, this process is happening everywhere under the mantle, not in specific locations. And it becomes a liquid as it cools. And then primary water is forced upward, while atmospheric water is subject to the effects of gravity and flows downward. And when people ask me all the time, what are the depths of which you must drill to reach primary water? And that does depend on how quickly you're able to hit a rock fissure or some type of rock that has fractures in it, where primary water can then escape. And the wells generally are drilled between 150 feet and can go up to 800 feet in depth, dependent on where you drill. So it is the primary hydraulic cycle driven by Earth's energy versus the secondary water cycle that is rain and snowmelt. Now, we have all been taught that our water comes from rain and snowmelt. Sadly, that is not the entire story. Rain and snowmelt is as a result, by and large, of evaporation of primary water that surfaces from down below. So why would there be such a massive media campaign to frighten all of us about the scarcity of water? And it's because of the global intention to privatize the water supply, when we are in fact the water planet. And again, water's continuously produced. And I think, Carrie, one of the ways in which it was explained to me, and I could visually see what was meant by water coming up endlessly from down below, when I was told, well, look at the geysers that spray up out of the ground endlessly. There's a gorgeous geyser called Fly Geyser, F-L-Y Geyser. All of you that are listening, I would really recommend you type it in and take a look at this geyser. It's magnificent. Also, Jericho is an example of a city for thousands of years that has existed in the middle of sand dunes. And here is this beautiful green city. When you also think about the endlessly flowing waterfalls, say, for example, at the top of the Hawaiian Islands, on top of the mountains, where there isn't snowmelt and it's not constantly raining, so that water that continuously cascades out of the tops of the mountains down into the pools of water down below is coming from the Earth's mantle and is primary water. So what is most important is to understand we're being massively fooled, and we're being contained within an illusion that we're running out of water, which is, in fact, is going to reduce the food supply. We already know right now that Mexico is toting water to some remote villages by donkeys, because they are also told they're running out of water. We know that running out of water is the marching orders for all controllers and all water agencies worldwide. And the World Economic Forum, which everyone is talking about these days, has also told us that during the World Water Day of 2021, which focused on the value of water and how it impacts our everyday lives and social economic stability, climate change, and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the World Economic Forum will tell you that over 700 million people will become displaced by the year 2030, known as water refugees. In other words, the World Economic Forum is telling us that the current rate, that there will be 40% gap between global water supply and demand by 2030, a 40% undeliverable amount of water to people by 2030. The water is being turned off under the illusion that there isn't any to turn back on, and that is simply not true. I'm going to go over some of the agencies that have been responsible for this massive hoax that has been slowly and perpetrated upon us for countless years. This has been in the making. Now, I did a video called Water Wars, Stealing Water for Profit and Power. And this was back in about 2014, 2015, when I was discussing how they were creating the water markets from natural energy resources, and that the wars of the 21st century would be fought over water rather than oil, as in the last century. Now, of course, we know, many of us know, that water is now traded on the Chicago Mercantile Stock Exchange, and the price is being set to California water pricing standards to be priced as oil and gold. And this is now a market. This is the privatization and creating a market. Now, I found documents years ago. I'm going to just go over one, and then I'm going to list many of the players that are backing this illusion. And it includes your water agencies in your local cities. So I will discuss that a little bit more. But there was this document that was discovered by a legislator. This is some years back now. It was a water wars map, and it was a blueprint for water control. The EPA made a secret map for new regulatory to push along with the Army Corps of Engineers and the USGS. So what occurred was this legislator found this secretly drafted, highly detailed maps of the United States waterways to set the stage for a controversial plan to expand regulatory power over streams, wetlands, a claim the EPA strongly denied, which is, of course, not true. We'll go over that more. The high-resolution maps of each state depicted a dense and veiny web of intertwining waterways. They were color-coded to distinguish everything from canals and ditches to reservoirs to marshes and to various types of streams. The maps showed permanent streams, but also those that contain water for only part of the year. The EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers want to define that authority and are eyeing waterways deemed to have some significant connection to major rivers, lakes, and other streams. The committee only learned about the maps, this is the legislative committee, only learned about the maps after hearing from the U.S. Geological Survey that the EPA was having them drawn up. So this was a plan dealt years ago to privatize the U.S. water market. And I found plans out of Israel and out of the UK and London that discussed the detailed plans of how they were going to take over the U.S. water supply. And they're doing that now by tricking all of us into believing we're running out of water when we're not, and it's a renewable. Again, always remember we're the water planet. And one thing that Paul would say, and it makes sense, and I'm going to say that right now, when you fill up a glass of water, understand that when it's primary water, it's made from hydrogen and oxygen, which are two gases. When you fill up a glass of water from the wastewater treatment plant, which is now becoming reused water of choice, and also was an executive order to build more wastewater treatment plants to refabricate toilet to tap. And that was put through a few years ago as an executive order, a way in which to bypass the concern of water scarcity, because we wouldn't run out of our excrement to redrink. And that is what you're going to hear more about. When you hear the word reused water, that's what they're talking about. New water, reused water, etc. They're going to be having us drink our urine and fecal material. But I discovered back in those days, and this is only a partial list of the corporate government agencies that I found that were conspiring to privatize the public water supply, not only in the United States, but worldwide. And back then I was telling people repeatedly that we must do all we can to expose these corporations and agencies. Now you can do your job and help expose this as well. And more importantly, very important, learn and understand what water really is. It's two gases, as I said, hydrogen and oxygen. It's produced endlessly down below the mantle of the earth. We are not running out of water. Now, I am not suggesting that we misuse the use of water, but I am saying to all of you, we are being massively psyoped into believing we're running out of water. And the damage of that thinking is going to cost farmers and ranchers their farms, massively reduce our food supply, when they have us believing that our source of water comes from reservoirs, and I will get into that also. So here's a partial list of the corporate agencies. The World Bank, Viola, which is Rothschild, Goldman Sachs Group, Inc., Global Markets Institute, that's their section in Global Sachs Group, Inc., Global Markets Institute, World Energy Council, Water for Energy, and that was in 2010. 2030 Water Resources Group, McKinsey and Company, Nestle, Coca-Cola, the RAND Corporation, NASA, the Scripps Institute, NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Bechtel Corporation, EPA, which is, of course, Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Interior, the USGS, which is United States Geological Survey, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, General Electric, Denar and other multi-conglomerates, Summit Global Management, Inc., utility companies throughout the United States. Now, remembering that all of our utility companies within the United States are run by Rothschild, aka the World Bank, LLCs, and other corporations as well. All of it is run and already orchestrated to take down this country. Continuing, the United States, local, state, and federal governments, which are all incorporated, including the United States. Corporate government employees, including most elected representatives. Strategy and marketing of United Water, Sustainable City Network, Inc., Global Water Intelligence in Oxford in the UK, American Water Company, California Water Agencies. That would be all the agencies in the states, everywhere, not just California.
What I'm doing right here in the La Mission in Baja is trying to get a primary water driller to come over and drill for primary water. I wasn't aware that it was so shallow, 150 to 800 feet. That's pretty good. That's not that deep, considering they drill thousands of feet or miles for oil. So these can be located by people that know how to look at the geography of the land, use dowsing, which Kevin will get into later, or other technological means, mechanical means to locate the fissures and fractures of the earth, and then drill through those to get to the primary water. So I'll give you an ongoing report how I'm doing here in Mexico with it. I did contact the organization in California that's, they want a topographical map of the area just to start off. And so I'll send them that and see what kind of operation they have and how they work. I'm just curious. Because we don't have the funding right now, but it's just funding's close, so I want to get things started with this, and this is potentially a benefit for everybody, in the whole world, actually, to get primary water for farming and for just residential use. That's very important. Water is, of course, important. So do you guys have any comments here on this, what we just heard from Deborah, or questions?
I can say a few things in response to what we were just talking about, what Deborah Tavares was speaking about anyway. What I actually was saying, it's all about control with those that manage the planet, and they do speak very openly about what they're doing. And I remember a famous quote by Henry Kissinger as well, a notorious character indeed, one of the Dark Force bunch. I'm sure everyone's heard of him. And he spoke of how it's essential to control water and food, to control what he called the useless eaters. Because as far as they were concerned, when people get to a certain point, they just categorize them. If they're no longer supporting their control systems and their infrastructure of global destruction, then they're considered useless eaters. But obviously with control then becomes dependency upon that which is instigating the control, and then obviously with that they can then dictate and micromanage the fine details of everyone's lives, which of course is managing the consciousness through the agreements that are in response to the engineered issues they have created. And she mentioned Gaddafi as well, and how he and how he was in regards to water and such. And as I remember, Gaddafi was also developing a currency that was backed by gold, because as I understand where he was located.
He's in Libya. Yeah.
Libya, that's the one. Yeah, they said he in that country was very rich in gold apparently, and so he was developing a currency that was gold backed. Therefore, it was going to be independent of the banks and their influence. And of course, that was another reason why they wanted him removed. And so, of course, then they eliminated him and presented him as though he was a tyrant, which, of course, he wasn't. He was like, as far as I understand it, he was actually a very popular leader and a person of the people, and regaled as like, as I said, a very good leader amongst his people. And interesting enough, I heard a lot of theories and evidence as well. I don't remember the fine detail of it, but it was suggested, and it's very likely this was the case, that all the seas of the planet were also once pure water as well, and there was a certain point where it all became infused with salt and therefore became undrinkable, of course, unless you remove the salt or such. And it was suggested again that was done on purpose, again to limit the availability of water throughout the planet. And so it suggests more dark force activities going on at some point in our so-called history. And it's very interesting as well because, as we know, Mars was a planet that was completely devastated and destroyed by the controllers. Everyone moved underground, and obviously it would suggest that was a planet as similar to our own. At one point, that was destroyed by the controllers for whatever reasons they might have, you know, as their agendas roll out across the universe, and so it would obviously that would have had a secondary water cycle as the planet Earth would have had, but that obviously was destroyed when the entire planet was decimated. And so it's just a barren rock. But quite recently, or relatively recently, they found great lakes of frozen water on Mars as well. And so it suggests that since the planet at one point was devastated, and so its secondary water cycle was therefore destroyed, that a secondary water cycle could not have accounted for the water lakes that must have then occurred after the planet was devastated. And so that again is evidence that these for the primary water source from the movements of the what are they saying, the energies within the earth and the rocks and such, obviously is something that occurs with all planets, and so it's just a natural process. And the fact that there are frozen water lakes on Mars suggests that even after the devastation of the planets, those are the primary water systems continue to operate. And so and then in regards to the huge food shortages as well, I mean, we've got a situation now in the UK as well, where apparently all the lorry drivers throughout the UK are not allowed to transport their goods because of the so-called virus situation. And a lot of people have spoken about these impacts on the food supply lines because of these restrictions. There's all over the world, people aren't allowed to pick the food, people aren't allowed to transport it. And so there's huge breakdowns in the food supplies, which are obviously going to culminate in extreme food shortages somewhere down the line. And this is just a most recent example of it. These lorry drivers aren't allowed to transport their goods. And in fact, all the shops in our local area and probably out throughout the UK are emptying out very rapidly. So we could have quite a situation in the UK in regards to food situations. And again, that's what I said on some of them real side experiences. That's probably why the guides were giving us the opportunity to perhaps assume these robotic bodies as the possible solution to deal with the control and restriction of that which is required for a biological vehicle, as in food and water. And finally, I just want to make a point about the water. As we all know, the stuff in the water, the fluoride calcifies the pituitary gland as well. And it does seem that the pituitary gland is involved with the intuitive faculties of the body vehicle. And so if you calcify that can also diminish people's intuitive capabilities. Of course, with real awareness, is a step beyond the intuitive part, but nevertheless, it does also make it so people are more locked into the one-dimensional surface world without an alternative source of information, with the intuitive body being in literal terms, one step from the real awareness position. And so, yeah, they were the points I wanted to make anyway.
Great. Yeah. Gaddafi was drilling for oil, and then he found this primary water, to my understanding, and then he utilized it. But and then I was thinking also about the underground tunnels and everything that is going on, and they probably have access to the primary water through all these deep tunnels that are under the earth. They probably found the water, so they have good water access, the controllers.
Yeah, because on a previous show, or whenever we spoke last, as you mentioned primary water, you were speaking about how one method of possibly locating it was through the use of dowsing rods. And I have a couple of dowsing rods myself. I can't say that I'm particularly proficient in them, but I have dabbled about with them. You see, like that, you see. They come in various shapes and forms. Some people just use twigs. Some people use more elaborate setups. Some people use little pendulums, and it's a similar idea. You would hold a pendulum with a little crystal on the end, and you would establish a yes or a no. For example, you'd say to yourself, "My name is Kevin," and it would spin in a certain direction. That would mean a yes, and then obviously the opposite would be no, and so you'd establish a yes and no based on similar principles then to the dowsing rod, and then it would be a similar situation. You'd walk along with your little crystal, and over where you were walking, constantly holding in your mind the notion is there water, and presumably then when it hovers over the correct point and there is water beneath you, it should in theory give you an affirmative and spin in the direction that indicates a yes. But the most established, the most typical dowsing rods come in this form. And like I was saying earlier, before the show began, when it comes to just using twigs and things like very, very rigid, it's very easy to cheat, because obviously the motion of your hands will obviously dictate the motion of the dowsing rods. But these are designed in such a way that you see the main structure, which is like a big letter L. It goes into a barrel here, which moves independently of the main structure. And so when you hold them, it is impossible for you to dictate their motion, because they just spin all over the place. And if you try and move your hand, for example here, if I try and move my hand that way, it actually is spinning in the opposite way. So there's no way you can really cheat with it. And the idea would be, you would walk along with these dowsing rods. You'd have in your mind what you want to locate. When you find them, the rods should cross, and then you have your target. And as I said, I played around with them in a few courses, and I said I wasn't particularly good at them, but like anything, the more you practice, the better you become at it. But anyway, I have this book here. It's called The Essential Dowsing Guide by Dennis Wheatley. And so I should read some stuff in regards to this, what he had to say. Dowsing is popularly associated with water finding, conjuring up visions of people using wire-shaped twigs, which mysteriously react when approaching a water supply in the earth. Down the ages, there have been many celebrated water diviners. Such dowsers exist today with incredible skills. George Applegate finds water supplies when dowsing from aircraft, and has not made a mistake in 15 years. But the scope of dowsing is much wider than water finding. So, what is dowsing? Dowsing can be simply defined as the skill of detecting invisible targets. This being so, its scope is limited only by the imagination. For example, some dowsers specialize in the following fields: water, oil, gas supplies, mineral lodes, soil analysis, precious metals, archaeological remains, treasure troves, medical diagnosis, finding lost objects, finding lost people, map dowsing. The list could be extended indefinitely. Many dowsers are adept at finding earth energy flows and exotic patterns which interlace the surface of the planet. On a more prosaic level, underground public utilities, from water pipes to sewers, can be accurately located by dowsing. So, how do you dowse? Most people need to dowse with a dowsing tool, such as an L rod or pendulum. The rod can be made from a metal coat hanger, piano wire, or fencing wire. The tube can be of metal or plastic, such as a ballpoint pen casing. Tube retention can be achieved by bending the rod's end or using a grommet. A pendulum can be made of wood, crystal, brass, or perspex, and weighs from 2.5 grams to 10 grams. The cord can be a fine twine or chain. Dowsing tools act as indicators when a dowsing target is found. An L rod will swivel, and a pendulum will gyrate. The dowsing tools do not respond to the target. The body reacts to the target, and the dowsing tools respond to a dowsing reflex mechanism. Theories abound as to what the dowsing mechanism is. L rods are easy to make from wire coat hangers, piano, or fencing wire. A pendulum can be of any weight, suspended on a fine cord, twine, or chain. Some dowsers need no dowsing tools, and this is known as device-less dowsing. They intuitively sense the target, or may have tingling feelings in their body. Dowsing is a form of sixth sense, latent in all of us, which has atrophied in modern man. After all, why douse for water when it is on tap in the home? Guy Underwood believed the dowsing sixth sense to be an atavism inherited from our remote ancestors, the early tool-making hominids, to whom it was invaluable in the evolutionary survival stakes. Most people do not realize they have this sixth sense, but it can be easily triggered and, with practice, developed to professional standards. In over 10 years of teaching dowsing, I have not found a person who could not douse. Children adapt to dowsing much more easily than adults, as they carry less mental baggage, biases, and prejudices. They learn rapidly and often make faster progress than adults. From the onset, they believe the dowsing rods will work for them. Adults often do not have this approach and have inner doubts as to their dowsing potential. Tom Lethbridge, the doyen of long cord pendulum dowsing, believed that everyone could dowse, and the few who could not had simply blown a psychic fuse. He also believed that a piece of chewing gum on the end of a string was more powerful than all the world's supercomputers, as it put the holder in touch with the higher self, which knows the answers to all questions. Edgar Cayce, the American dowser, seer, and healer, spoke of accessing the Akashic record, a cosmic library of total knowledge. His grandfather taught him to douse at the age of 4. He learnt the skill rapidly, and his grandfather said, "Edgar, one day you will be quite famous." He was. We have seen that dowsing is associated with mental states, and that the brain wave patterns register these. Also, that spiritual dimensions were introduced by Tom Lethbridge and Edgar Cayce, linking dowsing with the higher self, the source of cosmic knowledge, whilst Underwood regarded dowsing as the activation of the sixth sense. Later, in 1986, the American dowser Sig Lohengren introduced the concept of spiritual dowsing. Dowsing, in effect, involves both physical activity, such as the use of dowsing tools, and mental activity. The latter is of paramount importance, since without mental preparation there can be no dowsing. So, what is the secret, if that is the word, in activating the dowsing sixth sense? The answer lies in visualization and frame of mind. We will examine these in some detail. In effect, they are simple precepts. In the dowsing discipline, the first law is simply, you will not detect that which you cannot visualize. In other words, if you do not know what you seek, you will never find it. There is a vital need to visualize a dowsing target to the best of one's ability. Some targets are easy to visualize, such as water and gas pipes, or electrical wiring in walls. Lost objects, such as car keys and wallets, are likewise easy to visualize. In visualizing any target, it is important to hold this visualization in the mind to the exclusion of everything else. In this one-pointed visualization, you are completely tuning in to the target and tuning out the rest of the universe. Nothing but the target must exist for you. Visualization varies in people just as the senses vary. Some people attain excellent mental images, while others find visualization difficult. Major General W.F. Cooper, the present president of the British Society of Dowsers, has an important truth to impart in dowsing. Intent is all. So if you are not adept at visualization, don't be over concerned. Keep the thought of the target uppermost in the mind to the exclusion of all else. Let this be your intent. Here, intent means that, although you may be deficient in visualizing, you can still find another way of tuning in to your target which will be equally as effective. Some dowsing books advocate the use of samples of the target or witnesses to enhance the visualization. If, for example, water is the target, then they advise holding a bottle of water in the hand so that it touches the palm and the rod. If the target is a water pipe, then a piece of steel or plastic similar to the pipe is held. With good visualization, however, enhancing witnesses are not needed. Note how long it takes for professional ball players, such as golfers, tennis players, and snooker players, to achieve the right frame of mind before they strike. They attune themselves bodily and mentally for the strike, and visualize their bodily movements and what will happen to the ball along a trajectory or In the case of a snooker player, what will happen to the ball struck, and where the white ball will eventually come to rest. When professional players shape up badly in a tournament, they invariably offer as the reason, "I wasn't in the right frame of mind." We can learn from these ball-playing professionals. To achieve the right dowsing frame of mind, one has to apply a few simple precepts before every dowsing task. With practice, these simple precepts will become second nature to you. They are: relax bodily and mentally. Take a couple of deep breaths and let your arms hang loosely by your sides. Eliminate all butterfly thoughts. Still the mind. Bury the ego. Visualize the target in quiet concentration. But importantly, don't over-concentrate, as this will lead to either no results or, at best, spurious results. Be quietly confident that the rods will work for you, but never be overconfident. Dowsing cockiness produces inconsistent results. Dowsing rods act at times as if they have a mind of their own and can play tricks. They are great ego tamers. Eliminate from your mind all preconceived notions, biases, auto-suggestion, and never predict what the rods will do. Should you do this, the rods will willingly oblige by reacting as you predicted. Be a totally neutral observer of events, with no interest whatsoever in whether the rods will react at any point. Make your dowsing passes slowly. Douse like a sporting action replay, and allow the rods to overcome their inertia on finding a target. Should a sudden noise interrupt your dowsing frame of mind, a passing truck, helicopter, or voices, abandon the dowsing pass and re-establish your frame of mind. Don't douse if you are feeling low with the flu or some other complaint, or when fatigued. Dowsing can be fatiguing, so douse in short periods, followed by relaxation breaks. A suitable routine could be, for example, 15 minutes dowsing with a 10-minute relaxation break. If you visit an ancient site to douse for, say, earth energy patterns, don't begin dowsing immediately. If you have journeyed by a car, you will probably be stressed. Each site has its own persona or spirit of a place, so on arrival, relax for 15 minutes and quietly absorb the ambience and feel of the place. Don't be over serious about dowsing. It's great fun, so enjoy it. In the precepts described, we are faced with an apparent contradiction in talking of relaxation and concentration simultaneously. Hamish Miller neatly sums dowsing up in his phrase, relaxed concentration.
That's great. There's a lot there. I mean, just applies to what we're doing with a new presentation in a certain way, like such as seeing. We're talking about the is and seeing something that doesn't exist or it's not there, but we learn how to see it, in our own way, seeing and being this reality. So this dowsing, very interesting. I remember I used to play basketball, and one of the techniques I used when I was on the free throw line, I had a certain type of focus. And I was particularly good if I had something, because you mentioned don't over focus. So I would not be, if I had some kind of injury or something that I was sort of looking at on the side, I'd do better because I had the intent to make the shot, but I had something on the side that I was like a little bit focusing on. I wasn't focusing totally on seeing the ball go in the hoop. I was there was something in the background that I was focusing on that helped me actually to focus better on shooting. And so that's why, don't over focus, because you kind of, it depletes the, what you're trying to do. Yeah, we're like antennas, like you say. This is like a crutch. Actually the dowsing rods are a crutch to what we already have. And there's a technique that, like you mentioned, that you don't even need the dowsing rods. We're like antennas ourselves to pick up certain things with the intent that we have. We can gather this information. So this is, and then the intent, of course, that's very important, having your intent and focus there, and then everything kind of opens up to what it is you're focusing on, what you want to obtain. So that intent is very important. This is fun. This is good stuff. Yeah. Thanks for bringing this up, Kevin. Ryan, do you have anything? Any comments?
Movie, actually Western movie. I thought about to ask my father and my uncle about to how to find the water, because some people in Iran have a job about to find the water and make some way to village or to garden, and most of the village in my country, and the water about came from the spring, and they have all cow, animals, and everything they have, they drink this water. And this primary water very important actually for the city. But I come and very question about this: what happened? What they doing when in the past, a few years ago? What they doing with this water? I asked them about this because I see what's happening with this primary water. I see some wave and water and pool and some trees drink about this water. I need more about it, how to work to make this spring go to the village or something happen in this way.
There's your job, right? You're learning how to do this so you can help other people find the water.
Yes. Yes.
That's very valuable. And then you can come over here to Mexico and help us find it. Thank you.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is just all the cover up, that's going on. It's just so amazing how the controllers are covering everything of a benefit up and destroying the whole planet. It's just amazing how huge this process is that they're doing. So we're just a little bit here, we're just doing what we can, but it could be big if there's enough agreement here. I mean, each person that agrees to something wonderful, it makes a huge difference. So thank you, Kevin and Ryan. Anything else you want to end with?
It's just there is also the possibility that the processes by which the primary water is produced, I mean, it's very possible that if that was very difficult to find, which I don't see why it would be, but if it was, would it not be possible to do it, to replicate the process by artificial means if it involves hydrogen, oxygen, and some sort of process whereby, I can't remember what, it's very likely that some sort of technological means could yield the same, could convert the hydrogen and oxygen into water in that way. I think I remember there was an individual who actually produced some machines and was selling them at one point. I think they were quite expensive, but he suggested they just sat in the house and they simply converted the oxygen and produced water. I don't think it was a lot of water, but I think he suggested, I think he could produce about a gallon in a day, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what happened to him. I was trying to look for him recently, but I think he's disappeared ever since. So.
Yeah,
There is that possibility, though, a technological means of doing what would be a biological natural process.
yeah. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. I mean, any chemist seems like he could, and along with some inventor, some mechanical engineer could invent some machine to do this, make it a big machine and can produce a lot of water. Or desalinate. I mean, desalinate, it's supposed to be expensive, but supposedly, you know, we have all this technology. Why not do that either? Why not utilize the water in the ocean? And that's interesting. I never heard that it could be, and I know there's primary water underneath the ocean, but it gets mixed up with this saline and the salt. But initially, maybe it was fresh water and they introduced salt to it. So that could be too. Who knows? And yeah, so there's so much. So, well, that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we'll do the NUUU, which is our connection to the reality that just is. And let's go from there. Watch your dream visions to see what life shows you. NUUU. Ryan? And Kevin?
Yeah.